Neville Longbottom was never meant to be the chosen one. He was never the loudest voice in the room, never the most confident, never the student teachers expected greatness from. For years, he was reduced to comic relief, the forgetful boy who lost passwords, melted cauldrons, and feared his own shadow. But beneath that nervous exterior lived something far more powerful than natural talent: quiet resilience. What makes Neville extraordinary is not flashy intelligence like Hermione's or raw destiny like Harry's. His brilliance was subtle. It grew slowly. It was built through pain, humiliation, and loss. And unlike others who were driven by fame or prophecy, Neville was driven by something purer: love and memory. His parents were tortured into insanity by Death Eaters, leaving him raised by a strict grandmother who constantly compared him to the father he never got to know. He grew up feeling like a disappointment. That psychological pressure could have broken him permanently. Instead, it forged him. Neville represents a different kind of intelligence: emotional intelligence, moral courage, and strategic bravery under pressure. When Hogwarts fell into darkness, it wasn't the chosen one holding the resistance together. It was Neville. And in the end, the boy everyone underestimated became the one who destroyed the final Horcrux and made Voldemort mortal. Not because of prophecy, but because he chose to be brave. He could have been the chosen one. The prophecy made by Sybil Trelawney did not belong exclusively to Harry Potter. It described a child born at the end of July to parents who had defied Voldemort 3 times, and Neville Longbottom fit those conditions just as perfectly. This means destiny did not single out Harry from the beginning. Fate had 2 options. Voldemort made the choice himself when he marked Harry as his equal. By choosing Harry, Voldemort unknowingly spared Neville from being directly targeted as an infant, but he also confirmed that Neville possessed the same potential threat. This is psychologically important because it reframes Neville's entire existence. He was not a side character in someone else's story. He was a parallel possibility. If Voldemort had chosen Neville instead, the entire series would have revolved around him. That reality means Neville's potential power was never inferior. It was simply unexplored in the same spotlight. Growing up unaware that he was almost the center of a prophecy adds another layer of tragedy. Neville struggled with insecurity, never knowing he carried the same destiny. He believed he was ordinary, clumsy, forgetful, and below average. Meanwhile, the prophecy suggests he was extraordinary from birth. This contrast between perceived weakness and hidden potential defines his character arc. Neville represents the idea that greatness can exist without recognition. He proves destiny does not create heroes, choices do. Unlike Harry, Neville did not grow up knowing he was special. He grew up feeling inadequate. That makes his later bravery even more meaningful. He fought not because prophecy pushed him forward, but because morality did. If Harry had died, Neville would have stepped into that role. That possibility is quietly confirmed in the narrative. Dumbledore himself acknowledges that Voldemort chose the boy he feared most. That fear could have applied to Neville. Therefore, Neville was never secondary in power. 2. He grew up with psychological trauma. Neville's childhood was shaped by horror long before he entered Hogwarts. His parents, Frank and Alice Longbottom, were tortured into insanity by Bellatrix Lestrange and other Death Eaters. The Cruciatus Curse was used repeatedly until their minds permanently fractured. Neville did not lose his parents to death. He lost them to something worse: living absence. They were alive, but unreachable. Visiting them at St. Mungo's and receiving candy wrappers from his mother, who barely recognized him, is one of the most heartbreaking moments in the series. This experience shaped Neville's emotional foundation. He grew up knowing exactly what Voldemort's followers were capable of. He did not learn about evil through textbooks. He learned about it through family destruction. Unlike Harry, whose parents died heroically and were memorialized, Neville's parents became tragic remnants of war. There was no grand story told about their sacrifice in public. Neville carried that quiet grief privately. His grandmother raised him with strict expectations, constantly reminding him of his father's bravery. This created internal pressure. He felt he had to live up to a legacy he barely understood. Trauma can produce two outcomes, fear or strength. For years, it produced fear in Neville. He doubted himself. He hesitated. He believed he was weak. But trauma also gave him clarity about right and wrong. He understood the cost of dark magic on a deeply personal level. That understanding fueled his eventual courage. He never sought revenge in a loud, angry way. Instead, he honored his parents by standing against the ideology that destroyed them. Psychological trauma often creates bitterness. Neville chose resilience instead. He did not let pain turn him cruel. He let it make him compassionate. His empathy comes directly from his suffering. When the war intensified, he was not fighting abstract evil. He was fighting the force that shattered his family. 3. He was emotionally intelligent. Neville's intelligence was never about quick spells or perfect exam scores. It was about emotional perception. He understood vulnerability because he lived it. This made him sensitive to others who were marginalized. His friendship with Luna Lovegood is not accidental. Both were mocked. Both were underestimated. Neville did not laugh at Luna's eccentricities, he respected her individuality. That demonstrates emotional maturity. Emotional intelligence involves recognizing pain without needing it to be spoken aloud. Neville could sense loneliness in others. He knew what exclusion felt like. That awareness made him kinder. He did not compete for dominance within his friend group. He did not crave validation through arrogance. Instead, he quietly supported those around him. When Dumbledore's army formed, Neville committed himself fully. He practiced harder than almost anyone else. Not because he wanted praise, but because he wanted to improve. Emotional intelligence also involves self-awareness. Neville knew he was not the strongest wizard in the room. Yet he did not withdraw permanently. He pushed through discomfort. Over time, this persistence built confidence. Confidence built skill. Skill built courage. His growth was internal before it became external. While others relied on natural talent, Neville relied on effort. That mindset is emotionally grounded. He did not resent Hermione's brilliance or Harry's fame. He found his own pace. Emotional intelligence allowed him to process humiliation without collapsing permanently. Every mistake became a lesson rather than a final verdict. That adaptability is intellectual strength in a different form. By the final book, Neville is no longer reacting emotionally from fear. He is acting from conviction. 4. He stood up to his friends in year 1. In the first year, Neville attempted to stop Harry, Ron, and Hermione from sneaking out at night. He knew they were breaking school rules and risking house points. Standing up to 3 close friends is harder than defying strangers. Peer pressure is powerful, especially for someone already insecure. Neville could have stayed silent. He could have avoided confrontation. Instead, he physically blocked them. That action may seem small compared to later battles, but psychologically it was enormous. He was choosing principle over popularity. At that point in the story, Neville had little confidence. Yet he still found the courage to act. This moment redefines bravery. Bravery is not always facing monsters. Sometimes it is confronting friends. Dumbledore later awards him points, acknowledging that resisting friends takes exceptional courage. That recognition validates Neville's moral backbone. He was not motivated by ego. He genuinely believed stopping them was the right thing to do. His moral compass functioned independently of approval. This early decision foreshadows his future leadership. Leaders must sometimes stand alone. Neville practiced that long before he became a resistance figure. That single act planted the seed of self-respect. He proved to himself that he could act despite fear. Courage, once exercised, becomes easier to access again. That night in the common room was the beginning of his transformation. It was subtle, but foundational. 5. He mastered what he loved, herbology. Neville struggled in many academic subjects, particularly those requiring fast reflexes or confidence under pressure. Professors like Snape intensified his insecurity by publicly humiliating him. Yet in herbology, something shifted. Around plants, Neville was calm. He understood their properties instinctively. Passion transformed his performance. This is a powerful commentary on intelligence. Intelligence is not universal mastery. It is alignment between ability and interest. When Neville worked with magical plants, his hands stopped shaking. His voice steadied. He remembered instructions clearly. Professor Sprout recognized his talent early. That validation mattered. For someone constantly criticized, being seen as capable changed his self-image. Success in herbology became a foundation for broader confidence. It proved he was not inherently incompetent. He was simply pressured in the wrong areas. Over time, this confidence spilled into combat training. Mastery in one domain can rewire self-belief in others. Eventually, Neville became the herbology professor at Hogwarts. That full-circle moment is deeply symbolic. The boy who doubted himself became an educator shaping future witches and wizards. His academic journey dismantles the myth that struggling students lack intelligence. They may simply require the right environment. Neville's story in herbology teaches that passion unlocks potential. When fear disappears, ability surfaces. 6. He led Dumbledore's army in Harry's absence. When Harry left Hogwarts in Deathly Hallows, the school fell under the control of Snape and the Carrows, transforming it into a place of fear and punishment. Students were tortured for minor disobedience. Speaking against the regime meant physical pain. In that suffocating atmosphere, most students chose survival through silence. Neville chose resistance. Without prophecy guiding him, without public recognition protecting him, he stepped into leadership naturally. Dumbledore's army could have dissolved without Harry. Instead, Neville rebuilt it. Leadership is not about titles, it is about responsibility accepted under pressure. Neville provided hope when hope was illegal. He offered students a place to belong when the castle felt hostile. The room of requirement became a sanctuary because Neville believed it should. He coordinated secret meetings. He protected younger students. He became the visible face of rebellion inside Hogwarts. This was not impulsive bravery, it was sustained courage. Every day he risked torture. Every day he returned anyway. Leadership in wartime requires emotional endurance. Neville carried not only his own fear but also the fear of others. He became a symbol inside the castle walls. Students looked to him because he did not break. That transformation from insecure boy to underground leader is one of the most dramatic arcs in the series. Importantly, he did not imitate Harry. He led in his own way, steady, grounded, protective. His authority came from sincerity. He never sought power. He simply refused to surrender. That refusal kept resistance alive until Harry returned. Without Neville holding the internal front, Hogwarts would have fallen completely into darkness. His leadership proves that heroes are forged in absence, not spotlight. 7. He endured physical torture without surrender. Under the Carrows regime, punishment was not detention, it was cruelty. Students were forced to practice the Cruciatus Curse on classmates. Disobedience resulted in direct torture. Neville was targeted repeatedly because he refused to comply. Bruised, beaten, and visibly injured, he still returned to resist. Pain is designed to break the will. The Carrows expected submission. Instead, they created defiance. Neville's endurance reflects extraordinary psychological strength. He had already seen what torture did to his parents. He knew its consequences intimately. That knowledge could have paralyzed him with fear. Instead, it made him resolute. He refused to let the same fear that destroyed his parents silence him. Physical suffering often isolates victims. Neville did the opposite. He turned his pain into fuel for rebellion. Each scar became proof that he was still standing. Torture aims to strip identity. Neville preserved his. He did not beg. He did not betray. He did not retreat into passivity. That resistance is not dramatic in flashy ways. It is quiet survival. The kind that builds revolutions slowly. His endurance demonstrates that courage is not the absence of pain. It is action despite pain. By continuing to resist after repeated punishment, Neville psychologically defeated his oppressors. They could harm his body but not command his loyalty. That distinction is powerful. In enduring torture without surrender, Neville mirrored the resilience his parents could no longer display. He completed a legacy interrupted by cruelty. 8. He destroyed the final Horcrux. When the Battle of Hogwarts reached its climax, Voldemort appeared invincible. Harry seemed dead. Hope appeared extinguished. In that moment of despair, Neville stepped forward. Voldemort publicly humiliated him, attempting to break the spirit of the remaining defenders. Instead of shrinking, Neville declared continued resistance. This confrontation is pivotal. The sword of Gryffindor appeared to him, not to Harry. The sword manifests itself to true Gryffindors in moments of need. That means Neville's bravery was recognized by magic itself. Killing Nagini was not simply striking a snake. It was destroying a fragment of Voldemort's soul. It was the final Horcrux. Without that act, Voldemort would have remained immortal. Neville's swing of the blade altered the entire outcome of the war. He did not hesitate. He did not wait for permission. He acted. Symbolically, this is the boy once deemed incapable now ending the Dark Lord's protection. The act required precision and nerve under extreme pressure. The battlefield was chaotic. Death surrounded him. Yet he focused. That focus demonstrates growth beyond imagination. The prophecy may have centered on Harry, but the victory required Neville. This moment confirms that the war was not won by one hero alone. It was won by collective bravery. Neville's role was decisive. By killing Nagini, he transformed from underestimated student to historical figure in wizarding history. That action sealed Voldemort's mortality. It is impossible to overstate its importance. 9. He proved bravery is learned, not inherited. When Neville arrived at Hogwarts, he was timid and insecure. He forgot passwords. He melted cauldrons. He feared Professor Snape more than dark creatures. Nothing about him screamed hero. Yet bravery is not a personality trait fixed at birth. It is a skill developed through repeated choices. Neville practiced courage gradually. Each small act built the next. Joining Dumbledore's army was a step. Fighting at the Department of Mysteries was another. Standing up to friends was an early rehearsal. Growth rarely happens overnight. Neville's transformation is realistic because it is incremental. He stumbled frequently. He doubted himself often. But he kept choosing participation over avoidance. That repetition rewired his self-perception. By the final book, he walks with steadiness. His voice carries conviction. This arc teaches that bravery is not genetic. It is cultivated. His grandmother once feared he was not magical enough. In truth, he was emotionally developing at his own pace. Courage requires exposure to fear. Neville faced fear constantly. Instead of retreating permanently, he leaned forward. Over time, fear lost its control. His story dismantles the myth that heroes are born different. They are shaped by persistence. Neville is proof that sustained effort can outgrow insecurity. He did not suddenly become brave. he practiced becoming brave. 10. He carried his parents' legacy with honor. Frank and Alice Longbottom were celebrated Aurors before they were tortured. Their bravery was legendary. Neville grew up in the shadow of that legacy. His grandmother constantly reminded him of his father's courage. That comparison could have crushed him permanently. Living up to heroic parents is psychologically heavy. Yet Neville never resented them. He visited them faithfully at St. Mungo's. He accepted candy wrappers from his mother as treasures. That tenderness reveals emotional strength. He did not define their condition as weakness. He defined it as sacrifice. Rather than chasing revenge recklessly, he honored their values. He fought against the ideology that destroyed them. That is a mature response to generational trauma. Carrying legacy can produce anxiety. Neville turned it into motivation. His eventual defiance of Voldemort symbolically completed what his parents began. The Longbottom name did not end in tragedy. It continued in resistance. When he stood on the battlefield, he represented more than himself. He represented unfinished courage. By surviving and fighting, he restored dignity to his family history. He transformed inherited pain into inherited strength. That is one of the most powerful arcs in the saga. Legacy did not break him. It shaped him. 11. He rejected pure-blood supremacy despite being pure-blood. Neville was a pure-blood wizard, descended from a respected magical family. According to Voldemort's ideology, that status should have aligned him with supremacy beliefs. Yet Neville rejected that thinking entirely. He grew up witnessing how pure-blood extremists destroyed lives. Blood status meant nothing to him compared to character. This ideological clarity is significant. It shows independent moral reasoning. He did not inherit prejudice from family pride. Instead, he formed his own ethical conclusions. Many characters struggled internally with blood politics. Neville never wavered. His friendships reflected inclusivity. He fought alongside Muggleborns and Half-Bloods without hesitation. His resistance inside Hogwarts directly opposed a regime obsessed with blood purity. That rejection was not abstract. It was active. He risked punishment to defend students targeted for heritage. This stance required courage because he could have remained silent and relatively safe. Instead, he chose solidarity. Morally, this places him firmly on the side of equality. His pure-blood status makes his rejection even more powerful. He dismantled supremacy from within its own category. 12. He defied Voldemort face to face. During the Battle of Hogwarts, when Voldemort believed Harry was dead, he attempted to crush the remaining resistance publicly. Neville stepped forward in that devastating silence. Facing Voldemort directly requires extraordinary courage. This was the wizard who shattered his family. The wizard who terrorized the entire magical world. Neville could have blended into the crowd. Instead, he declared that the fight would continue. His speech was not grandiose. It was sincere. That sincerity gave it power. Voldemort attempted to humiliate him, setting the Sorting Hat on fire as punishment. Even in flames, Neville did not beg. That image is symbolic, courage enduring under fire. When the sword of Gryffindor emerged, it affirmed his worth. Killing Nagini seconds later sealed his defiance permanently. Facing Voldemort was not about physical strength. It was psychological resistance. Neville refused to internalize fear. He stood as proof that Voldemort could not dominate every spirit. That confrontation marks the final stage of his evolution. The insecure boy was gone. In his place stood a man shaped by choice, loyalty, and resilience. Neville's story is not loud. It does not scream destiny. It whispers resilience. And that is why it is so powerful. He shows us that intelligence is not always academic. It can be emotional strength, moral clarity, quiet leadership. The courage to stand up even when your voice shakes. In a world obsessed with chosen ones, Neville represents something far more relatable, the underestimated child who grows into unexpected greatness. Without Neville, Voldemort would have won. Without Neville, the prophecy would have meant nothing. Without Neville, hope inside Hogwarts would have died. And maybe that's the true lesson: sometimes the most important hero is the one nobody saw coming.